The first time I saw her, she was standing in my kitchen. Not cooking. Not cleaning. Just standing there. Sunlight streamed through the wide bay windows Greg insisted we install during the renovation 2 years ago, the renovation I didn't want because the house was fine. He said it would increase resale value. Greg always thought in terms of value. The girl, because that's what she looked like to me at first, couldn't have been older than 23. Long dark hair. Soft features. That effortless kind of beauty that doesn't yet understand the power it holds. She smiled when she saw me. You must be Lauren. Hi, I'm Mia. Her voice was warm. Polite. Almost rehearsed. I forced a smile back. Yes. I'm Lauren. My own home felt slightly unfamiliar in that moment. Greg came in behind her, carrying Ethan on his hip like some picture-perfect father in a diaper commercial. Babe, he said casually, this is the nanny I told you about. He had mentioned interviews. He had not mentioned this. She's amazing with the kids, he added quickly. You'll love her. Mia knelt down and smiled at Sophie, who immediately giggled and reached for her. I felt something shift, small but sharp. Mothers know. We don't always know what we know. But we knowed I hadn't wanted a nanny. Yes, my consulting work had picked up. Yes, juggling school drop-offs and Zoom calls was exhausting. But exhaustion felt honest. Temporary. A nanny felt like surrender. Greg insisted. It's not 1950, he told me. You don't have to do everything. We can afford help. We. He'd started using that word more frequently. We can afford it. We deserve it. We need it. And yet somehow, I was the one who felt replaced. Mia moved in quickly. Not physically, but energetically. She arrived early. Stayed late. Cooked dinner sometimes when Greg texted that he'd be running behind. Soon, she knew where everything was kept. Soon, she didn't ask before rearranging things. Soon, Greg and Mia had inside jokes. Remember the zoo meltdown? He'd laugh. I still have applesauce in my hair from that day, she'd reply, smiling too easily. I told myself I was imagining it. Until I wasn't. It started with the planning sessions. Greg said they needed to coordinate schedules. You're overthinking, he told me one evening when I came downstairs at 11:45 p.m. to find them sitting at the kitchen island. Wine glasses between them. Laptop open. Laughing. Kids are finally asleep. It's just easier to talk logistics. Logistics. Mia stood when she saw me. Oh, I should probably head out, she said, though she made no move to gather her things. Greg waved a hand dismissively. Stay. We're almost done. The tone was subtle. But it wasn't the tone of an employer. It was familiarity. Comfort. Territory. Then came the family vacation. We hadn't taken one in over a year. Greg claimed work was too demanding. Yet suddenly, he booked a beach house in Florida. For the kids, he said. They need a break. And Mia was coming. For help. I should have refused. Instead, I packed sunscreen and swallowed pride. On the third night, I woke up thirsty and walked toward the kitchen. The patio doors were cracked open. I heard laughter outside. Greg's voice. Then Mia's. Low. Intimate. I stepped onto the deck quietly. They were sitting close, too close, on the outdoor sofa. Greg's hand resting casually on her knee. Not accidentally. Not fatherly. Intentionally. I didn't confront them. Not yet. Because confrontation requires certainty. And I needed proof. The proof came on a Tuesday afternoon. Mia asked if we could talk. Her hands were shaking. I didn't plan this, she whispered. Plan what? Then she slid a small white stick across the kitchen counter. 2 pink lines. I stared at it like it was written in another language. Does Greg know? I asked quietly. Her silence answered me. Of course he did. How long? I asked. She swallowed hard. Since, before Florida. The timeline rearranged itself in my head like a cruel puzzle. The late nights. The shared glances. The logistics. He said he's filing for divorce, she continued softly. He said you've been unstable for a while. Unstable. The word felt like a slap. He's been recording arguments, she added hesitantly. He says the court needs to see how volatile you are. I stopped breathing for a moment. Recording? Suddenly, every recent disagreement replayed in my mind, every time he pushed buttons, escalated tone, provoked reactions. It wasn't chaos. It was strategy. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even cry in front of her. Instead, I did something Greg never expected. I smiled gently at Mia. He told you he'd give you the house, didn't he? I asked softly. Her eyes widened. Yes. Did he mention he cheated on his first wife too? Silence. What? She whispered. Greg rarely spoke about his first marriage. He framed it as a mutual separation. We grew apart. That wasn't the full truth. And I still had the emails from years ago. Mia looked smaller suddenly. Younger. I didn't know, she breathed. Of course she didn't. Predators never tell the whole story to the next victim. And in that moment, I understood something clearly. Greg thought he was replacing me. He didn't realize he was repeating himself. Over the next 2 weeks, I did something unexpected. I befriended her. Not in a fake way. Not in a manipulative way. But gently. Patiently. We had coffee in the afternoons. Talked about her family. Her dreams. Her fears. I never insulted Greg. I just asked questions. Did he promise you marriage before he filed? Yes. Did he say I'd lose the kids? He said, you're emotionally unstable. That judges see that. Did he say the house would be yours? Yes. After the divorce. One afternoon, as she cried quietly at the kitchen table, I reached across and squeezed her hand. And my phone, face down beside me, recorded everything, and Greg thought he was 10 steps ahead. He didn't know I'd stopped reacting and started calculating. The shift confused him at first. I became calmer. Softer. I stopped arguing when he pushed. I didn't rise when he baited me. He'd stand in the doorway and say things like, you've seemed off lately. Or, are you sleeping okay? You've been emotional. He wanted me defensive. Volatile. Recordable. Instead, I smiled. I'm fine, I'd reply. The recordings he'd secretly collected over weeks? Useless. No explosions. No hysterics. No unstable narrative. Meanwhile, Mia began unraveling. It started small. He hasn't filed yet, she told me one afternoon, staring at her tea. He said timing matters for his promotion. Promotion. Right. Greg was up for regional director at his firm, a position he'd been chasing for years. Image mattered. Stability mattered. Affairs with former interns did not. You said intern? I asked carefully. Mia nodded. I worked in his department last summer before nannying. That's how we met. The air left my lungs slowly. So it wasn't random. It was proximity. Power. Pattern. Does his boss know? I asked. She shook her head quickly. He told me we have to be discreet. That HR would misunderstand. Of course they would. Because there were policies. Because he had violated them. Mia looked at me differently that day, not like an enemy. Not even like competition. Like someone who might know the way out. He said you'd lose the kids anyway, she whispered, voice cracking. He said you're unstable. That courts favor dads now. That night, after she left, I pulled up old files on my laptop. Greg's first wife, Hannah, had once emailed me years ago, right after Greg and I got engaged. I never responded. I thought she was bitter. Now I reread her message. He told me I was crazy too. He said I was paranoid. He had an intern back then. Be careful. My hands trembled. The pattern wasn't new. I just hadn't been the target yet. When Greg announced his promotion party, I nearly applauded. Big night, he said proudly. Everyone important will be there. How wonderful, I replied sweetly. We should host it here. He blinked. You'd be okay with that? Of course. It's your home too. He hesitated, maybe surprised I wasn't bitter. Maybe relieved. Great, he said finally. My boss, the executive team, some board members. Invite both sets of parents, I added. They'll want to celebrate. He frowned. That's not really necessary. I insist. His pride overruled caution. He agreed. I also extended one more invitation. Mia. He assumed I didn't know. He assumed I wouldn't dare. The house glittered the night of the party. Caterers moved gracefully through the kitchen. Champagne flutes clinked. Soft jazz filled the background. Greg wore his navy suit, the one he saved for victory moments. He looked confident. Polished. Untouchable. His boss, Mr. Calloway, arrived with a firm handshake. Congratulations, he said. We're counting on you. Greg's smile stretched wide. Mia arrived last. She wore a simple dress. No jewelry. No eye contact. She looked pale. Our eyes met across the room. I gave her a small nod. She nodded back. An hour into the evening, Greg tapped a spoon against his glass. Everyone, he called, grinning. I just want to say. Actually, I interrupted gently, stepping beside him. May I say a few words first? He stiffened. Of course, he said through clenched teeth. I took the microphone. I've supported Greg's career for over 15 years, I began warmly. I've celebrated every late night, every promotion, every strategic decision. Polite laughter. I've also learned something important about strategy. Greg's smile faltered. I pulled a small remote from my clutch. And tonight, I said calmly, I'd like to share something about honesty. The television behind us flickered on. A voice filled the room. Mia's voice. Crying. He said Lauren's crazy. He said she'll lose the kids anyway. The room froze. Greg's face drained of color. Another clip played. He promised me the house. He said once the divorce is final, it's ours. Gasps. Lauren unstable. House promised. Promotion timing. Then my voice, gentle, controlled. Did he tell you he cheated on his first wife too? Mia's stunned reply echoed through the speakers. Greg lunged toward the television. Turn that off, he barked. I stepped back calmly. Or what? I asked quietly. His boss stared at him in disbelief. Is she a former intern? Mr. Calloway asked slowly. Silence. Mia looked at the floor. Greg opened his mouth. Closed it. The weight of policy, liability, scandal, it all hung in the air like smoke. This is inappropriate, Greg snapped. She's trying to sabotage me. I met his eyes. No, I said softly. I'm just playing the truth. Mr. Calloway's expression hardened. Greg, he said evenly, we need to talk. Now. They stepped into my office. Greg looked back at me once, fury, panic, calculation. But for the first time in months, he wasn't in control. The party dissolved quickly. Whispers spread like wildfire. Guests avoided eye contact. My in-laws stood beside me, stunned but protective. Mia sank into a chair, trembling. "I didn't think you'd actually play it," she whispered. "I needed witnesses," I replied gently. Mr. Calloway and Greg returned 10 minutes later. Greg's promotion was revoked on the spot. An internal investigation would begin immediately. HR would be notified about the intern relationship. He wasn't fired that night. But everyone in the room knew his career had cracked. His father approached me slowly. "Is this true?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I said. He looked at his son with something heavier than anger. Disappointment. By morning, Greg's access to company systems was suspended pending investigation. Mia moved out within a week. Not with him. Away from him. 2 months later, she filed a civil claim for fraud and emotional manipulation. She had texts, promises, financial discussions. Greg had underestimated everyone, including the young woman he thought he controlled. The morning after the party, the house felt strangely quiet. No jazz music. No clinking glasses. No inflated ego filling the air. Just silence. Greg didn't come home that night. He texted once. "You've destroyed everything." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "No." I exposed it. Within 2 weeks, his company placed him on administrative leave. The HR investigation uncovered more than just Mia. There were inappropriate late-night messages to former interns. Expense reports that didn't quite align. Hotel receipts from conferences that never existed. His boss, Mr. Calloway, called me personally. "I'm sorry," he said. "We trusted him." "I did too," I replied quietly. Greg resigned before they could formally terminate him. It sounded better that way. But in finance circles, word travels fast. He wasn't blacklisted publicly. He was simply not called back. Greg filed first. He asked for primary custody. He cited emotional instability. He submitted edited recordings, clips of arguments carefully trimmed to make me sound reactive. Unfortunately for him, context exists. My attorney played the full versions, including the parts where Greg baited, mocked, provoked, including the part where he said, "Just yell. Come on. Let's see it." The judge watched quietly. Then my attorney presented the real evidence. The recordings from the party. The intern timeline. The promises to transfer marital property. The financial overlap. Commingling. Deception. Manipulation. Greg's argument collapsed under its own weight. The judge ruled. Joint legal custody. Primary physical custody to me. Child support at a substantial amount based on prior income. The marital home awarded to me due to dissipation of marital assets. Greg stared at the bench like he didn't recognize the language. He'd assumed narrative mattered more than facts. He was wrong that Mia's civil claim moved forward separately. She had texts where Greg promised marriage as soon as the divorce clears. He'd sent her Zillow links to houses in our neighborhood. He told her the home would be theirs. Her lawyer framed it as fraudulent inducement and emotional distress. Greg tried to settle quietly. But he didn't have the liquidity he once did. Legal fees mounted. Reputation eroded. The confident man who once hosted promotion parties in tailored suits now rented a 1-bedroom apartment 30 minutes outside the city. Alone. 3 months after the divorce finalized, I sold the house. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Too many echoes. Too many staged arguments. Too many memories of being recorded instead of heard. With my half of the equity and my own savings, I purchased a bright corner condo downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Sunlight in every room. A park across the street where Ethan and Sophie could run freely. No nanny. I adjusted my consulting schedule. I built boundaries. I built peace. The first night in the new place, Sophie climbed into my bed and whispered, "Mommy, are we safe here?" I kissed her forehead. "Yes," I said. And for the first time in months, it was completely true. Greg's parents surprised me. They didn't defend him. They didn't excuse him. His mother came over one afternoon with a casserole and sat at my kitchen table. "I raised him better than this," she said softly. Or at least I thought I did. I didn't gloat. I didn't punish. "People make choices," I replied gently. She nodded. They continued seeing the kids regularly, supervised at first, then normally. But something had shifted. Greg wasn't the golden son anymore. He was the cautionary tale. 6 months later, Greg asked to meet. Public place. Coffee shop. He looked thinner. Less certain. "I never thought you'd actually go through with it," he said. Through with what? Blowing everything up. I stirred my coffee calmly. "You blew it up," I corrected. "I just turned on the lights." He exhaled slowly. "You ruined my career. You risked it." Silence stretched between us. "I thought you'd fight. Or scream. Or beg," he admitted. "I did that once," I said softly. "In my first marriage." He blinked. "This was your first marriage," he said automatically. I met his eyes. "No," I replied. "This was my last." He didn't understand at first. Then he did. A year later, my consulting firm doubled in size. I specialized in workplace ethics and corporate culture advisory. Irony isn't subtle. Companies paid me well to identify internal risk patterns, toxic leadership, boundary violations, reputational vulnerabilities. I understood those patterns intimately. At home, the kids thrived. Ethan joined soccer. Sophie started piano lessons. They laughed more. They slept better. So did I. One evening, after tucking them into bed, I stood at the condo window overlooking the city lights. My phone buzzed. A notification from LinkedIn. Greg's profile had been updated. Independent consultant. No company listed. No team. No promotion party. Just a man rebuilding from rubble he created. I didn't feel revenge. I felt release. Greg thought the house was security. He thought the narrative would win. He thought youth and secrecy were leverage. What he never understood was this. Control only works if the other person is afraid to stand alone. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of divorce. Not of reputation. Not of being the crazy one. Because truth doesn't scream. It waits. And when it's ready, it plays clearly through a speaker in a silent room. On the first anniversary of moving into the condo, I hosted a small dinner party. Close friends. My parents. My in-laws. The kids. No secrets. No tension. Just laughter. As I poured champagne into my own glass, Ethan looked up and asked, "Mom, why don't we have a nanny anymore?" I smiled softly. "Because I don't need one." He nodded like that made perfect sense. And maybe it did. Later that night, after everyone left and the dishes were done, I stood alone in my quiet kitchen. No hidden cameras. No whispered logistics. Just peace. Greg once told Mia I was unstable. Maybe he was right. Because stability built on lies is fragile. And I chose to destabilize it. On purpose. I turned off the lights. Walked toward my children's rooms. And for the first time in years, I knew something with absolute clarity. The woman in my kitchen was never my replacement. She was the warning. And I listened.